The man in the elevator is a scary urban legend from Korea about a girl who lives on the 14th floor of her apartment building. It is also known as the elevator murderer or the elevator killer. There was a 19-year-old Korean girl named Haruko who was attending university in a large city. One night, she had to stay late in the library to finish a project, and it was almost dark by the time she returned home. Haruko lived on the 14th floor of an old apartment building. She stood in the entrance and pressed the button to call the elevator. She always hated coming home alone so late in the evening. It just didn't feel safe. When the elevator came, she stepped inside and pushed the button for her floor. Just as the doors were about to close, a handsome man came running up. The man was out of breath and put out his hand to stop the doors closing. Then he stepped into the elevator and stood beside her. "You live on the 14th floor?" he asked, seeing the button lit up. "Yes," replied Haruko. "Oh," said the man, smiling. "I live on the 13th. As the elevator ascended, he pressed the button for 13. Through the windows in the elevator door, Haruko watched the floors go by as they both stood in silence. She stole a few glances at the man. He certainly was handsome. She wondered if he would ever be interested in dating her. When he happened to look at her, she batted her eyelids and smiled sweetly at him. Just then, the elevator stopped at the 13th floor. The doors opened and the man stepped out. "See you later," he said. "Yes, see you," replied Haruko. As the doors of the elevator were closing behind him, the man suddenly turned around, pulled a sharp knife out of his jacket and said, in a menacing voice, "Upstairs!" Then, laughing like a maniac, he ran towards the staircase. The girl was terrified, but before she could do a thing, the doors shut and the elevator began to ascend. She began to panic. Desperately, she hammered the buttons with her fist, trying to get the elevator to stop, but it was no use. When it reached the 14th floor and the doors opened, the man with the knife was already standing there, waiting for her. In Korea, people say that this is a true story. The girl was found dead, stabbed to death in the elevator. People say that the worst part was not her death itself, but rather the sheer horror she experienced in between those two floors when she was trapped in the elevator and knew she was going to die. They claim that this is the reason that all elevators now have a stop button. Shadows in the Station is a scary story about a subway station in Japan where a lot of people commit suicide. It is based on a Japanese urban legend. I live in Tokyo and I take the subway to work every morning. My local subway station is Shinkoiwa Station on the Chua line. It is notorious as a place where people commit suicide. It has earned the nickname Suicide Station. Over the years, countless depressed and misguided people have taken their own lives there by jumping in front of the train. It became such a problem that they installed mirrors in the subway. They say that if the people catch sight of themselves about to jump, it will make them change their minds. I have no idea if it really works. Just last week, there was a suicide at the station. I was there when it happened. I saw the whole thing. It was early in the morning and I was waiting for my train. There were only a few other people on the platform. I heard a voice over the loudspeaker announcing that the train was coming. Just then, I noticed a woman who was standing right in front of me. She was just an ordinary woman, about 26 or 27 years old, but something about her made me nervous. She was acting very strangely. As the train came closer and closer, she stepped forward and began inching towards the edge of the platform. Something was very wrong. She glanced back at me and I could see there was a look of sheer terror on her face. Suddenly, I knew what she was about to do, but I was powerless to stop her. I was frozen to the spot by fear. All I could do was watch as she threw herself in front of the train. There was a screech of brakes as the train tried to stop. The other passengers on the platform screamed. Through the echo of their screams and the metallic screech, I heard a sickening thump. The sight was so grotesque, I couldn't get it out of my mind. There was blood and chunks of flesh flying everywhere. I thought I was going to be sick. The other passengers ran away from the platform and I ran with them. The officials had to close down the whole line. As we waited outside for a bus to take us to our destination, I kept thinking about that poor woman. The scene replayed over and over in my mind, but there was something wrong. Finally, it came on me. The shadows. That's what had made me nervous. I noticed it just before the woman jumped. The lights in the subway were bright, and when they shone down, they cast shadows from left to right. The pillars, the kiosks, everything cast a shadow from left to right. But the woman's shadow had been different. Her shadow went straight forward, stretching from her feet to the edge of the platform, as if a light had been shining from behind her. There was definitely something wrong. I had an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, and it wouldn't go away. I had to get to the bottom of this. As soon as I got to work, I went straight on the internet and began searching for old news stories about the station. There had been almost 20 suicides in the last year alone. Some of them were businessmen, some were housewives, some were old, some were young, and there were even a few children. Then, finally, I found what I was looking for. It was a photograph that had been taken just seconds before a middle-aged man had jumped in front of a train. I zoomed in and examined it very carefully. One of his legs was in the air and he was leaning back. I recognized the same look of terror on his face. There was a black shadow, like an arm, stretching out from under the platform and grabbing the man by the ankle. Suddenly, it all made sense. When I saw the young woman in the subway that morning, she wasn't jumping in front of the train, she was being dragged in front of it. I Would Rather Die is a creepy story about a boy and a girl who fall in love and then fall out of love. It is based on an urban legend from China. In Beijing, China, there were two high school students, a boy and a girl, who really liked each other. They both worked hard at their studies because they wanted to succeed in life. They would always help each other with their homework, and they spent so much time together that they eventually started having feelings for each other. Soon, they became boyfriend and girlfriend. When they graduated, the boy went to Nanjing University and the girl went to Beijing University. They kept in touch and maintained their relationship. They planned to get married when they finished college and have children together. But too much time spent apart can change a person's feelings, and in Beijing, girls are vulnerable to temptation. While the girl was living in Beijing, she met a lot of men. They were more successful, wealthier, wittier, and more handsome than her boyfriend. She decided to break up with her boyfriend and stay in Beijing. When she broke the news to her boyfriend that she was dumping him, he went out of his mind. He kept pestering the girl with phone calls until she stopped answering. Then, he traveled all the way to Beijing to see her. But the girl was very unsympathetic. She told him their relationship was over and she had found a new love. She told him to accept the breakup and go home. In a moment of anger and desperation, the boy took a knife and cut his wrist. "I would rather die than lose you," he cried. He had some kind of crazy idea that this would prove to the girl how much he loved her and convince her to take him back. He was very much mistaken. The girl didn't even try to stop him. She didn't even bother to call an ambulance for him. She just stood there and watched as the blood drained from his body. He writhed on the ground in convulsions of pain and agony. Until his dying breath, he stared at the girl, hoping she would agree to take him back. When he was dead, she called the police and they came to take his body away. She didn't even bother to attend his funeral. Shortly afterwards, the girl discovered she was pregnant. 9 months later, she gave birth to a little boy. Before long, she was fed up with being a mother. Taking care of a child was just too much work and it was affecting her social life. When men found out she had a child, they didn't want to date her. Eventually, she decided to give the little boy to her mother so that she could raise him instead. She didn't like her baby much, so it wasn't a difficult decision to make, and she found her life was much more fun without him. However, her mother insisted that she visit the boy 1 weekend per month. One night, the girl drove to her mother's house to visit her son. She only planned to stay there an hour or so, and then she would head back to Beijing to spend the evening with her new boyfriend. When she got to her mother's house, she saw the boy sitting in the front garden. She noticed there was something odd about him. When she looked closer, she suddenly realized that he was slicing his wrist with a knife and sucking the blood. The girl freaked out. She ran over and told him to stop. The little boy stared at her intently. That look was familiar. She recognized that stare. Suddenly, the child pounced on her and slit her throat with the knife. I would rather see you die than lose you, he cried. Dark Sleep is a scary story about 3 girls who spend the weekend in a cabin in the woods and learn about a creepy urban legend. Samantha had 2 best friends named Jenny and Amber. Her father was taking her on a weekend vacation and she invited them to come along. Her family owned a cabin in the woods and on Friday evening, her father drove the girls up there. "See that lake?" asked Samantha when they arrived. "That's Lake Samantha. My dad grew up here. He loved it so much. He named me after it." That night, after they had unpacked their things, the 3 girls sat around and thought of ways to amuse themselves. "Does anyone have any spooky stories?" asked Amber. "I have one," said Jenny. "It's a true story, too. It happened to a friend of a friend mine. She was babysitting these 2 little kids one night. She's sitting in the dark by herself watching TV and the phone rings. She goes over and answers it and hears a voice on the other end breathing really heavy, and it says, "Have you checked on the children?" "Jenny, come on," Amber interrupted. "Everybody's heard that one. That's the lamest scary story ever. Does anyone else have a story? One that's actually true?" "I know one," Samantha said. "About 10 minutes hike from here, there's an old broken down house. We passed it on the way up here. It's out in the middle of nowhere, tucked away off a narrow little side road. A long time ago, a man lived there. His family were really wealthy and they owned hundreds of acres of land around here. This man met a simple country girl from a simple country town and they fell in love. His family wasn't too happy about it. They didn't think the girl was good enough for him, but he ignored them. He was an independent type of guy and he went off and built a little house on a chunk of their land, out in the middle of nowhere. He married this girl and everything was wonderful. They had a daughter and eventually they had a son. This is where the story starts to go bad. Their son was sick. Not physically but mentally. He was sick in the head. He wasn't mentally disabled or anything. He was just a little off. By the time he was 9 years old, he became too much for his parents to handle, throwing temper tantrums, erratic sleeping patterns, disappearing into the woods and hiding, that kind of thing. Not knowing what to do about his son, the man turned to his family for help. His parents had the boy taken away. They sent him to a place deep in the woods. It wasn't an insane asylum, but it catered to people with special needs, if you know what I mean. His parents thought it was for the best. Over time, the family got used to not having him around. They gradually stopped visiting him. They functioned as if they had never even had a son, and everything went back to being wonderful again. 8 years later, the boy, who was about 16 or 17 at this time, managed to escape from the hospital. The staff did a search, but he was nowhere to be found. His family was notified and they were devastated. They were worried for his safety. He had been alone in the wilderness for weeks and he was probably dead. But the boy wasn't dead. One night, he found his way back home. He crept into his house and, one by one, he slaughtered his entire family. His father, his mother, his sister, all of them chopped to pieces. With the blood still dripping from his axe, he disappeared into the woods. When the grisly remains of his family were discovered a few days later, the townsfolk in the surrounding area were horrified. The police tried to find the boy, but it was no use. To this day, he has never been found. Since then, every year around harvest time, people have started to go missing. And in their place, a corn-husk doll would be left behind. Legend has it, the boy still roams the woods around these parts. The surrounding towns have bought into the legend and they hang dolls by their front door for protection. They say if the boy sees a doll hanging from the door of a house, he will pass that house by and leave the residents in peace. Nobody knows if it's true or not, but there's a doll hanging from the door of every house in town. "That's so creepy," cried Jenny. "Do you have a doll on your door?" "Of course," said Samantha. "My dad says he doesn't believe the legend, but we hung one just in case." "I think I just soiled my underwear," said Amber. Apparently, the house is still haunted by the ghosts of his murdered family, and if you go up there late at night, you can hear the whole thing take place all over again. "Do you think we could go up there?" Jenny asked. "Sure," said Samantha, "but tomorrow during daylight. There's no sense in tempting fate." That night, The girls slept in the same room and huddled together, trying to pretend they weren't frightened by the story and expecting to hear something tapping at the window at any moment. The next morning, Samantha's father made them all a big breakfast and they went down to the lake for a swim. Around noon, they decided to make the trip up to the old haunted house. When they got there, the girls sensed an eerie presence in the old, dilapidated place. It was enough to make their skin crawl. They explored the ruins of the old house, peeking into corners and sifting through the rubble. After a while, Samantha spotted something half buried in the dirt. It was some sort of book. She dug it out and dusted it off. The girls gathered around as she opened it and began to flip through the yellowed pages. "It's like a diary or something," said Samantha. "Maybe it's his diary," Jenny whispered. "Whose diary?" asked Amber. "The guy," said Jenny. "The guy that killed his family." Samantha read the diary aloud as the others listened. "There's a dedication inscribed inside the cover," she said. "It reads, 'To my family who I love and cherish and who will always be with me. September 5th, 1987. It has been hard alone. All they had to do was talk to me. They could not talk to me. I hear their voices late at night sometimes. I hear their screams. It is cold and dark. I needed love. They did not love me. The medicines are gone. I am free from all of them. If they could not love me, they had to go. Dark sleep for everyone. I hear their voices still, always screaming. December 4th, 1987. They have stopped looking for me. It is okay for me now. I live in the forest. I chase down the animals and put them in dark sleep, just like Mom and Dad and Sis. I visit my old house at night. I listen to the voices. At least they talk to me now. October 3rd, 1995. I left the forest years ago and moved to a small town nearby. Nobody recognizes me. No one knows who I am. I hear people telling my story sometimes. It makes me laugh inside. They all fear me. I still come to the forest sometimes. I spend the nights in my old house. Mom and Dad still talk to me. They say they are very proud of me. November 2nd, 1998. Life has been good. I found a job. I bought a house. I met a girl. She is very quiet and pretty. Sometimes I bring her to the forest. She likes it. I let Mom and Dad see her. They like her. July 1st, 2000. Today is a great day. I have a baby now. I am so happy. Mom and Dad are grandparents now. My wife isn't doing so well, though. It was hard for her. She might not make it. Maybe she will go in dark sleep. I am happy now. August 13th, 2010. I am so proud of my child. She is just like me, except she is much smarter. She has no problems. She doesn't hear the voices. She goes to school and has lots of friends. Not like me. Sometimes I take her to the woods. I love her so much. I named her after the lake. Samantha. For a few moments after Samantha stopped reading, there was a stunned silence. "What the heck?" cried Jenny. "Samantha, is this some sort of joke?" Amber asked nervously. "It isn't funny. This can't be true," Samantha whispered. "It couldn't possibly be." Just then, they heard the sound of twigs snapping behind them. When they turned around, they saw Samantha's father standing there. There was a strange, pained look on his face and he was holding an axe in his hands. "You weren't supposed to find that," he muttered. "There's no other way now. Dark sleep for everyone." "No, Dav," Samantha screamed. "No, no, no, no." When Samantha's father had finished chopping up the bodies, he put the pieces in large plastic bags and buried them deep in the woods. So deep that no one would ever find them. Now, they could be together forever. "I'll watch over you now," he mumbled as he patted down the earth with his shovel. "You may not understand now, but you will in time. This is the only way for us to be together. Dark sleep forever. We all stay together." The Bedroom Closet is a spooky ghost tale from Japan about two children who are home alone and decide to play a game of hide and seek. One day, while my parents were out, I was babysitting my little brother. We were alone in the house and decided to play a game of hide and seek. I closed my eyes and counted to 20 while my brother ran off to hide. When I finished counting, I started looking for my brother. I couldn't find him anywhere. Eventually, I went to my parents' bedroom and noticed that the door of their closet was standing ajar. "I know you're in there," I shouted as I pulled the door open. The bedroom closet was crammed full of clothes, and when I thrust my hand into it, another hand immediately reached out from inside and grabbed me by the wrist. "Come on! I found you!" I cried, trying to pull him out. "Come out of there!" But he wouldn't come out no matter how hard I pulled. He was hiding behind all the clothes and didn't speak a word. I started wondering what was wrong with him. Just then, I heard a voice behind me ask, "What are you doing?" I turned around and was shocked to see my little brother standing in the doorway of the bedroom. Looking back, I realized the pale, white hand was still holding on to my wrist. I screamed out loud and began to panic as I desperately tried to shake myself free of its icy grip. My brother rushed over to help me, and eventually, I managed to squirm out of the clutches of that pale white hand. We ran screaming from the room and rushed out of the house. Standing in the street together, trembling, we waited for our parents to return. When they finally came home, we told them what had happened, and they went upstairs to search the bedroom closet. Of course, they found nothing inside, just a bunch of old clothes. Go to Sleep is a creepy bedtime story about a young boy who is afraid to go to bed because he fears there is something evil lurking in his bedroom. It is based on a short story by Michael Whitehouse. For a tired child, bedtime is always a happy and relaxing event when they relax and drift off into a restful slumber. Some children complain when their parents force them to go to sleep before their bedtime. For me, bedtime was always a fearful and terrifying event that I dreaded every night. My fear of sleeping began when I was 8 years old. My parents moved me into my own bedroom, a small and narrow room at the back of the house, just large enough for a bunk bed and a chest of drawers. It had only one window which looked out onto the back garden and didn't let in much light. It was the first time I had ever slept on my own, and from the very first night, I remember experiencing a strange feeling of unease. As I lay on the top bunk, trying to fall asleep, I thought I heard a noise. I couldn't be sure, but it seemed to be coming from the bottom bunk. The room was pitch black, and the curtains on the window let in just enough light to make out vague shapes in the dark. At first, I wasn't sure what the noise was. Sometimes the simplest of sounds can be the most unnerving. I listened closely and realized that it was the unmistakable sound of bedsheets rustling in the dark. The bottom bunk was empty, but when I peered over the edge of my bed, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Something suddenly withdrawing out of sight into the bottom bunk. Something that did not wish to be seen. I lay there in disbelief, trying to convince myself that it was just my fevered imagination running wild. I turned to face the wall and closed my eyes, willing myself to fall asleep quickly. The rustling noise beneath me steadily increased until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was lurking in the bottom bunk began to toss and turn violently. Fear gripped my heart, and I had a terrible sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. My pulse was racing, and I broke out into a cold sweat. I could hear the sheets thrashing back and forth below. Eventually, I couldn't take the tension anymore and cried out for my mother. Suddenly, the bunk bed began to shake violently, clattering against the wall. The bedsheets below me were still twisting and turning. I couldn't get out of bed in case the thing in the bottom bunk reached out and grabbed me. I imagined it pulling me by the ankle and dragging me off into the darkness. I was trapped in the top bunk, like a cornered rat, unable to flee. I clutched my blanket with white knuckles and waited. The door finally burst open, and my mother came in to calm me down. Tears were streaming down my face. She lay down in the empty bunk and promised to stay there until morning. Eventually, I was able to fall asleep. The next day, as I played in the backyard, I kept glancing up at my bedroom window. Each time, a chill ran down my spine and my hair stood on end. I felt like something was lurking in that room, watching me play and waiting for night to fall, so it could be alone with me again. I tried to tell my parents about it, but they wouldn't listen to me. They just dismissed my claims as childish fears of the dark, and when night arrived, They ushered me upstairs and forced me to get into bed. "Go to sleep," said my mother. "Stop being such a baby." I didn't protest. It was no use. I resigned myself to my fate, climbed up to the top bunk, got under the covers and waited. Lying there in the darkness, alone and frightened, I heard the quiet rustling of bedsheets and knew it was starting again. But this time it was different. I heard the sound of slow, rasping breathing coming from the bottom bunk. The soft, labored wheezing made me shudder. Only a flimsy mattress separated me from whatever was lurking below. Lying there, paralyzed with fear, I just wanted the thing to leave me alone. Its labored breathing became louder and louder. Then, suddenly, I felt something long and thin poking at the underside of my mattress. I screamed in horror and the bunk bed began shaking violently. My mother came rushing in and calmed me down with a comforting hug. Eventually, my terror subsided and, with her standing guard, I was able to fall into an uneasy sleep. This continued for weeks. Night after night, I would wake up to the sound of rustling sheets. Each time, I would scream for help and the bed would begin to shake violently. As soon as my mother came in, everything would stop and she would have to spend the rest of the night in the bottom bunk, just so I could go to sleep. It was a difficult time for my family. My grandmother was sick and my mother had to go and take care of her. When I found out that my mother would be away for the whole weekend, I flew into a panic. There would be nobody to protect me from the thing in the bottom bunk. No one would answer my cries in the middle of the night. On the day my mother left, I rushed home after school and immediately stripped the bedsheets and mattress off the lower bunk and removed all of the slats. My plan was to prevent that thing having a place to sleep for the night. I hoped that somehow this would protect me. Unfortunately, that night proved to be the most terrifying experience of all. To this day, I shudder to think about it. I managed to fall asleep, but in the middle of the night, something woke me up. The room was pitch black and there was no noise, no rustling of sheets, no movement at all. However, something didn't feel right. Just then, I felt the covers on my bed begin to move. The horrifying truth suddenly dawned on me. The wretched thing that had terrorized me night after night was not in the bottom bunk. It was in my bed. I opened my mouth and tried to scream, but nothing came out. My eyes were wide with terror and I lay motionless, barely able to breathe. I didn't want to let it know I was awake. I could feel it lying beside me, something cold and slimy leaning against my right arm. It was lying under the blanket. I could see its outline, but I didn't dare to look. All of a sudden, it rolled over on top of me and I felt its weight pressing down on me. I will never forget that awful feeling. Hours passed and I lay there motionless, in the darkness, too frightened to move a muscle. I wanted to cry, but no tears would come out. Finally, I reached my breaking point and couldn't bear it a moment longer. Ever so slowly, I tried to ease myself out from under it. Inch by painstaking inch, I shifted my weight, moving sideways. Just as I thought I was about to escape, it moved. Dear God, it moved. I felt a clammy hand reach across my chest and close around my throat. Its grip gradually tightened and I felt it squeezing my neck. The horrid, slimy thing began writhing and contorting under the blanket. I could hear it wheezing, rasping and coughing. I felt its breath against my face, foul and cold as ice. Dawn was breaking and the first rays of sunshine were peeking through the curtains. I fought for dear life, but I was no match for it. As its scrawny fingers squeezed my neck, I felt the life ebbing from me. I tried to scream, but the thing's grip was too tight. I was fighting to stay conscious when, suddenly, it released me and slowly withdrew, melting slowly into the wall. I tumbled off the bed and scrambled out of the bedroom. When I got downstairs, I breathed a sigh of relief. I had survived the most horrible experience of my life. To this day, I still break out in a cold sweat at the sound of bed sheets rustling in the night. I spent the entire day trying to convince my father to spend the night in my room. Took some effort, but he finally agreed. Perhaps he was just trying to humor me while my mother was away. Whatever the reason, it proved to be a smart move because in one night it solved the problem for good. The very next morning, he stormed into my room and told me to pack a suitcase. We were moving to a hotel. The Cheap Motel is a spooky urban legend about two friends from college who need accommodation for the night. This story was first told in Latin by a Roman philosopher named Cicero around 50 BC. There were two young men who were students in the University of Chicago. For spring break, they arranged to visit some friends in another city. One of the students was staying in a house with some people he knew, but due to some confusion, they didn't have a bed for his friend. After some discussion, the friend decided to stay at a cheap motel instead. That night, they went out for drinks at a local bar and ended the night in a popular nightclub. It was almost 4 a.m. by the time they decided to call it a night. The first guy said goodbye to his friend and walked back to the house where he was staying. That night, as he lay in bed, the student had a horrible nightmare. In the dream, he could see his friend at the motel, crying out for help. He was being chased by a fat, bald man who was brandishing a knife. The student watched in horror as his friend was cornered by the man and viciously stabbed to death. The dream was so horrifying and realistic that the student woke up in a cold sweat. He lay in the darkness, trying to catch his breath and attempting to convince himself that it was just his imagination. After calming himself down, he managed to fall asleep again. However, this time he had another dream in which he saw the same fat, bald man dragging his friend's dead body out into a parking lot. As he watched, the man threw the corpse into the back of a white pickup truck and covered it with dirt and clay. Again, the student woke up in a cold sweat. His heart was beating fast and he decided that he had to check on his friend. He got dressed and made his way to the cheap motel. Upon arriving at his friend's room, he found the door unlocked. The room was empty and his friend was nowhere to be found. The student grew suspicious and called the police. When they arrived, he begged them to investigate his friend's disappearance. The police knocked on the door of the motel's office and a fat, bald man emerged. The same fat, bald man the student had seen in his nightmares. The frantic student ran out into the parking lot and stopped in his tracks. The only vehicle parked there was a white pickup truck with a pile of clay in the back. The student dug through the clay and unearthed the bloody corpse of his friend. When the police saw the dead body buried in the back of the pickup truck, they immediately arrested the motel owner and charged him with murder. This obscure urban legend is found in some parts of the United States, and it was inspired by a ghost story originally recorded by Cicero, who was a Roman philosopher that lived in Italy around 50 BC. Here is a rough translation of the original Latin story. Two Arcadians, friends traveling together, came to Megara. One betook himself to a private host, the other lodged at an inn. The one in the house saw in sleep his companion entreating him to come to his aid because he was entrapped by the treachery of the innkeeper. He might be rescued from imminent peril if the other ran swiftly up. Roused by the vision, the man sprang forth and made to seek the inn where his friend was lodging. But then the other's baneful fate caused him to renounce his kindly intent as unnecessary, and he went back to bed and sleep. Then his friend once more appeared before him, stabbed and begged him, since he had neglected to bring help in life, at least not to deny him vengeance and death. For his body, said he, done to death by the innkeeper, was at that moment being carried to the gate in a wagon, covered with dung. Constrained by his friend's reiterated prayers, he ran to the gate forthwith, seized the wagon indicated to him in his sleep, and brought the innkeeper to capital punishment.